Today on Locked On Canadiens, we recap that Oilers game and talk about whether there are any elite tier players in the Habs system.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1034. As you know, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. And I'm not joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matla, but Scott will be back for tomorrow's episode. He has had some day job stuff going on, so I've been manning the show. And if you've missed the last two episodes, we had Blaine Potvin in for our Monday episode, so definitely go check that out. And then we had the lovely Ian Boisvert on our Tuesday episode, so please go check those out. They were a little bit more general. They're not time sensitive, so you can check them out. We're talking about where the Habs are going in the future, trade deadline thoughts, things like that, free agency thoughts, and that's all on the first two episodes. I also want to apologize for the lateness of this episode. It was a 9 p.m. game, so I unfortunately fell asleep. And not only that, I fell asleep after the second period, and I was not even able to wake up, even though I had set an alarm so that I could watch the remainder and record the recap. So I had to watch the rest of the game when I got back from my day job and record accordingly. All right, so let's get into that Oilers game real quick. Today's episode is going to be short, as most of my solo ones are. The Edmonton Oilers game. So the first period, there were some ups and downs, and I thought in that first period specifically, Josh Anderson did not have a great period. However, he did seem to turn it around part of the way through the second period. Sorry, not second season, the second period, and he ended up with a pretty good second half of the game. I do want to point out that a couple of the goals, or the two goals that the Oilers scored in regulation, one of which seemed to kind of directly come from a Josh Anderson moment. They were the Oilers took advantage of the Canadiens' weaknesses or mistakes. That's something that a team with that kind of firepower up front can do. Obviously, the best player in the world right now is on the Edmonton Oilers. I did think that the Samuel Montembeault played well despite that, but one thing, it wasn't just about the goals scored. I felt that over the course of the game, the Habs slowly stepped up their game, and they went from allowing the Oilers to control everything to taking back control, hanging with a really good team with flaws, but a really good team. And overall, I was pleased with the Canadiens' effort. They did go into overtime, and for me, I would have liked for them to lose in regulation. Like, if you're gonna play well and lose, like, lose in regulation, so you will solidify your draft position. But I don't know, like, I was pleased with their effort. Like, I think that's the key takeaway there, is that they didn't start out so great. There were a lot of brain farts, but over the course of the game, they got better and better and better. Obviously, the overtime, we're gonna leave that aside. I did think that Caden Gooley had a particularly good game. I was very happy about that. I liked the energy from Pizzetta. Who else was good? There were a couple of low points, obviously. So by the time I'm recording this, it has already come to light that the shot that Joshua Roy blocked with his hand has caused him an injury, and he will now be out for indefinitely. We don't know how long, like, most likely the remainder of the season and beyond. So that's a piece of news that came out between the time that the game took place and the time that I'm recording this. So there's a little bit of an advantage to being late sometimes. What else? I thought Yoel Armia had some really good play, I think. Yuri Slavkovsky, very inspired. Obviously, Nick Suzuki is like constantly reliable. We are going to get back to talking about Nick Suzuki in our second segment, because I wanted to talk about whether or not, like, what tier of a center he is, and then kind of extrapolate from that and talk a little bit more about the Montreal Canadiens as a whole and their system as a whole. What else about that game did I really like? There were a few things. Like I think it is important to note that the penalty kill was pretty good. The power play too wasn't exciting or inspired in any way, but it did not make me want to drive off a cliff. So I think that's a lot of progress there. I like, as a rule, as a general rule, I don't tend to like the Oilers. I'm not a big fan, but I didn't hate that game too much. And like I said, it's, they are able to kind of keep control of the game, maintain possession. I think maintaining possession is a good way to put it, but I they're not capable of generating elite offense right now outside of the top line, and I don't know that that's such a bad thing. Like, they are still in very, very, very full rebuild mode. So one thing that I did want to point out is that I felt that the Oilers were taking advantage a lot of Josh Anderson not playing too well. Like I said, he did get better over time, and I'm not going to begrudge him, like, the improvement of the game. And I feel like, like, if it's a situation where the opponent knows when you're on the ice, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to give them a shot, a chance, the puck, anything like that. I just, I don't know. Maybe it's something that you examine as a coaching staff and you know, figure out how to play that person. And I don't want to be too gratuitous about this. Like, we have criticized him so much over the course of the season. So I just feel like you gotta put him in better positioning. You gotta shelter him a little bit. You have to you have to make up for his shortcomings. And I feel like it's the same with Brendan Gallagher. You kind of have to shelter him a lot. But one final thing I will say, I did say Yoel Armia had a good game. I think Yoel Armia overall has been playing really well. And I'm a little bit nervous about what Joshua Roy's injury does to that dynamic and whether he's going to be able to keep it up. But I think overall, pleased with that game. It's fine to get that overtime point. It is a really good team. It's a good team where they've got massive, massive, massive star power in their offense. So I'm not going to begrudge them that overtime loss, but onward and upward. They're going to go on to Vancouver and the Kraken. We have previews for those games on tomorrow's episode. Spoiler, we recorded tomorrow's episode before I'm recording this makeup episode. So I hope you'll tune in for that. But in the meantime, I do want to talk a little bit about whether or not the Montreal Canadiens have elite tier players. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Um, and sort of go over a little bit, like, I'm using an article for Springboard, so I'll explain that in a second, and we'll get into how it relates to the Montreal Canadiens as a whole. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is what also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. So that was a very stilted recap for the Oilers game. I'm so sorry. It's like I watched it in two parts, so it feels like I was talking about it in two parts or multiple chopped up parts. All right. So I wanted to talk about tiers and eliteness and things like that. Is eliteness a word? Because I read an article by good friend Sean Gentili of The Athletic, and he was talking about the NHL number one center tiers. So he went through the number one centers in the NHL, split them up into tiers, but the tiers weren't like, top, then next, then next, then next. It was more like, yes, you had your elite, like superstars, and then you had like other categories. So I wanted to obviously in the best of the best, he calls them, McKinnon, Matthews, Connor McDavid, right? And then there's a whole bunch of stuff about like veteran guys, things like that, like cup winners, guys who he calls it the spotlight awaits, that they are star players, but they haven't really had a chance to prove what they can do in a long-standing cup run kind of thing. So an example of a player he has like that is Sebastian Aho from the Hurricanes. And then the see you next year tiers like superstars who like we're not going to see them in a long playoff run. So Connor Bedard, obviously, but these are the guys in the future that are going to be the in the same tier as the McKinnons and the Matthews. So Jack Hughes is one of them. Connor Bedard is one of them. Then he has a bunch of bubble guys who are kind of like, what are these guys? So I was worried that he would put Nick Suzuki in this team. He calls them the bubble guys. On a fringe team, they're probably a number one C, but on a championship team, they're probably a number two C. And this is exactly where I thought I would see Nick Suzuki. And instead, the players he's got here are Bo Horvat, Dylan Larkin, the coward Mark Scheifele, Mika Zibanejad. So like it's fair. I don't know. I feel like Mika Zibanejad is like probably a step above those other guys, but I don't know. I don't have a column in the Athletic, or I don't write for the Athletic. And then there's like this one really bothered me. Pivotal point upcoming. Two young players who for now have lost a bit of their upward trajectory. It didn't upset me that Tage Thompson is there because that is a perfect description of Tage Thompson's season. He had that amazing season, that big contract. Now this season's and Scott and I have talked about it when we talked about Buffalo. But then Tim Stützle is here, and I don't know that he's lost his upward trajectory. I feel like his development has been fairly uneven in that like he's had like this amazing season and then a not so great season or whatever. And I feel like he's old enough at this point where that consistency would be important. But I don't know if I'm being uncharitable because it's Tim Stützle and it's the Ottawa Senators. So this was one that confused me. Like I looked for Nick Suzuki. I scrolled all the way down and I was like, I don't understand. Like there's so many categories here. One of the ones he has is someone has to take the opening face off because every team technically has a first line center. I'm not going to spoil the whole article, but it did make me laugh. And you should check it out. But this is where Nick Suzuki is. Nick Suzuki is in the solidifying their reputations category. And he says players who've either improved, returned to form, or followed up a previous breakout. Nick Suzuki, Montreal Canadiens. In the player tiers, we said this season would go a long way to deciding whether Suzuki was a true first liner rather than a player on a first line. He's provided some type of answer, delivering the best season of his career. He has a shot at reaching the 80-point mark after never having more than 66, and he's already tied his career high in goals with 26. Maybe most importantly, he's done all that as a plus player in an actual and expected goal differential. It's a major step forward. So, I'm going to do the Habs fan thing here. This is, again, if you want to catch the whole article, it is on The Athletic. It is written by not Nick Suzuki, Sean Gentili, and the title of the article is NHL number one center tiers, McDavid, Matthews, McKinnon, and guys just taking face-offs. And it, like, overall, it is a pretty interesting and fun article, but this is where, like, I feel like, and again, I'm not asking for gratuitous effusive praise of Nick Suzuki, but I feel like there's no mention here about his defensive improvements and about how he has remained in the Selke conversation over the course of the season. And you can say that he's not a McKinnon, a Matthews, McDavid. I'm not going to argue with that. Like that's not where Nick Suzuki is. I don't even think that he's in the step below them because all of those guys that Sean pointed out are like very talented guys that have the potential to really turn a playoff or take over a playoff run, things like that. I feel like Nick Suzuki was able to do that in the past when the Canadians had these unexpected runs. But I also feel like it always feels like there's like this reluctance to give him credit where credit is due because that's truly like I feel like it wasn't strong enough in how good Nick Suzuki already was, and therefore how good Nick Suzuki has become this year by improving upon his own play. Scott and I talk a lot about how he approaches the game in the same manner that a guy like Sidney Crosby or Patrice Bergeron would, and which is not to say like, oh, he's as good as Sidney Crosby. That's not what I'm saying, or he's as good as Patrice Bergeron. I'm saying the approach to his game is one of constant self-improvement, one of constant like using every tool at his disposal, whether it's, like coaching, whether it's learning, whether it's video work, whether it's skills, like all of that kind of stuff. He works very hard to improve every single aspect of his game. And he's done so much. Like I think it was very overblown how he wasn't that great at faceoffs, but if you look at his current season, it's clear that he did a lot of work and he's gotten better at them. But all this to say is that I'm looking at the Montreal Canadiens right now and in their system as well. And I'm trying to see if there are people that you would put people in this pipeline or on this roster that you would put there in elite tiers, right? And unfortunately, I'm only right now sensing that Uri Slafkovsky has the potential to be there. When he was drafted, his ceiling was really high. He's had a great breakout season. And if his ceiling is that high and he gets close to it or he approaches it, I feel like he has a shot at being in those conversations. 5 years from now, we'll be talking about that. But I'm not really seeing that many players in the pipeline that are like that. Like, and I'm not just talking about centers, I'm talking about everybody, right? And so that's something that the Canadians will have to solve because if you look at cup winning teams, they tend to have a guy like that. And it doesn't always have to be it doesn't always have to be at but in the defense pipeline, I'm seeing like incredible talent. I'm so excited about somebody like, for example, Lane Hudson, David Reinbacher. Speaking of Lane Hudson, we are going to talk about him in tomorrow's episode, spoiler. Like Caden Gooley, like we can't forget Caden Gooley. Like I see a lot of talent there. I see a lot of potential there, like or like wingers like Joshua Roy, for example. A guy like Kirby Doc, who's like really, really like a revelation, or he really just needed that change in scenery, all of that kind of stuff. A player that the Canadians honestly got in a steal. So there's a lot of guys that are good. And if you can make an entire roster out of guys that are that level at each of their positions, right? Then you're sitting pretty, you're doing really well. But I'm having a hard time right now seeing a guy in the Canadiens pipeline or on the current roster other than Slavkovsky that has that potential to be in those kinds of conversations. So let me know what you think because I'm really interested to know. But also, don't forget that tomorrow is our mailbag episode, or tomorrow we record our mailbag episode. So please send your mailbag questions to lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can also leave them in the YouTube comments. You can also tweet them at us or get at us at any social media. We're at LO_Canadians or at the Active Stick or at Scott Matla. I still have one more segment, and that is this week's 3 Up and 3 Down, and that is coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadians. But first, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. How often do you find yourself scrambling to get tickets and you're trying so hard to find tickets to something in your area, whether it's a concert, a playoff game, even, like a stand-up comedian or something like that? And it's so hard because it's honestly like sometimes the hidden fees themselves are such a big deterrent and it's so annoying. But here, let me tell you that on Game Time, you don't have to worry about anything like that because they do not have hidden fees. It is the only ticketing app that will give you complete peace of mind with your purchase because you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. The prices are all in and they show your total upfront. You know you're getting a great deal before you check out. And it is so easy to use because you can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so it is time for our weekly 3 up and 3 down. And this is one that I carried over and I pushed over from the last couple of episodes. If you're a regular listener, you will know that we usually do this on Monday and we usually do this together. But because I had 2 guests in a row, I wanted to really give them that time. I wanted them to have a chance to weigh in on their thoughts, whether it was about the trade deadline or the future or all of that. And I think I kind of want to focus on positives. It is unfortunate that Joshua Wah he is now injured because he was on my up list. Yoel Armia was on my up list. Josh Anderson before the Edmonton Oilers game. So remember, this is all for last week, was on my down list. The penalty kill was on my up list because even though it did allow some goals last week, it had a consistent run of keeping the puck out of the net. And part of that is obviously the goaltending. Samuel Montembeault has done a fantastic job. So those are some shout outs that I wanted to do. I don't have any Laval shout outs, but I also really, really wanted to focus a little bit on David Reinbacher as an up because him coming over to Laval really changes the dynamic of that potential playoff push. They're still outside of a playoff the position. We know that a lot of their upcoming games are against teams that they're competing with, they're jostling with for playoff positioning. So it's so significant, but also just in terms of the Canadiens being able to kind of keep an eye on his development and really be involved in it hands-on at this point is something really exciting. We have talked about with our previous 2 guests, as well as we are going to talk about it tomorrow, Lane Hudson. There's a potential for him to not cross the ocean, sorry, sign an entry level deal and come to the Canadiens. So there's a lot of up. And really, I also wanted to shout out Arbor Jacki because I'm just going to call this all the ups. Let's not do any downs. And like the downs are usually Josh Anderson officiating. Same old, same old. But let's talk about the ups. And Arbor Jacki has really added additional dimensions to his game as of late. So I want to focus a little bit on that. Like it seems like he seems to be getting smarter, and which is like he's never been a stupid player or one that's like just a goon, a one-dimensional goon or anything like that. But I do find that it's like he pushes it's like he effortlessly has pushed himself into a conversation where he is a player that's hard for the Canadiens to want to part with. Like he has cemented, let me put it that way. He has cemented his role on this team for the foreseeable future. And it's just like I know there's a lot of you that would listen and you would always say, he's more than just a face puncher. And we knew that. It's just that we wanted him to rein it in so that we could see his talent. And his talent has been even more than anticipated. So I, things are like in our 3 up and 3 down, we're just doing 3 up. And it's like at this point we're at 15 up. But I did really want to quickly mention that next week we will have at least 1 prospect expert, potentially 2. And we're going to talk about some recent games that David Reinbacher has played. And assuming he makes it into the lineup this weekend for the Laval Rocket, we're going to be scouting his first 1, 2, or 3 games. It looks like they might play him. We'll have more information on tomorrow's show with Scott fully dialed in and having a little bit more information. But I wanted to mention once again not to forget your mailbag questions because on the Friday mailbag will be just a mailbag. We won't be recapping the Canucks game until our Monday episode, simply because it is so late that I couldn't stay up for the Edmonton Oilers game. There's not a chance that either Scott or I are going to be able to stay up for that Canucks game. So we're just going to watch the whole thing in its entirety on the weekend and then recap it for Monday. Please, please, please send us your mailbag questions to lockedoncanadians@gmail.com, or you can leave them in the YouTube comments, or you can tweet them LO_Canadians, or you can find me on social media at The Active Stick. You can find Scott at Scott Matla. Please hit us up with mailbag questions. Again, so sorry for the lateness of this episode. I don't know if any of you will even get to it before the next one's out, but I really, really, really appreciate your patience. And thank you so much for listening. And we will both be talking to you on tomorrow's episode.